thus always to tyrants. It has been on the seal of the Commonwealth of Virginia since the Virginia Convention in 1776. These were also the words shouted by Brutus after he stabbed Julius Caesar. And these are also the words of John Wilkes Booth after he shot Lincoln and leapt to the stage below. The assassination of Lincoln was one of the most horrible, impactful events in U.S. history. Most people know of Lincoln's assassination, but they only know the 16th president, John Wilkes Booth, and the gunshot. Lincoln was an intelligent, bold man. He had 18 months of formal schooling altogether, but he did not complete them all at the same time. He learned to read even though his parents were illiterate, and this was encouraged by his stepmother. He had an IQ of 148 per Simonton's estimates. After being questioned about why he hadn't yet delivered a proclamation of abolishment, he responded, "Suppose I do that. There are 20,000 of our muskets on the shoulders of Kentuckians who are bravely fighting for our battles. Every one of them will be thrown down or carried over to the rebels." He delivered 2 Emancipation Proclamations after that, with the famous and final one being on January 1st of 1863. He also led troops personally in the battle at Fort Stevens in Washington. He took many steps to keep his country as his forefathers intended. He claimed there were 5 reasons that states couldn't secede. The 5 reasons were, he said, states can't physically separate. It was unlawful to secede. A government that allows states to secede falls into anarchy. Americans are friends, not enemies. And it shows the rest of the world that a government of the people can't survive. And at the time, we were the world's only democracy. The Gettysburg Address. The Gettysburg Address redefined liberty and nationalism. This inspired and changed the thoughts on our country. The quote on Lincoln was, "Lincoln managed in a process of saving Union, killing slavery, and to redefine the creation of a more perfect Union in terms of liberty, economic equality," and it rallied the citizenry behind him. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln was just part of a bigger conspiracy. He wasn't supposed to be killed at all in the original conspiracy. In 1864, Ulysses S. Grant halted an exchange of POWs. He did this, although cruel. He thought that returning POWs to the opposing sides would offer more manpower to a dwindling war. Lincoln wasn't to be murdered, but kidnapped in a plan by Booth and other conspirators. And his kidnap was to be used to bring him to the Confederates to help restart the exchange of the POWs. They planned on doing this while Lincoln was supposed to attend an event at a local hospital. Instead, Lincoln attended a event at the National Hotel where he watched the captured Confederate battle flag be awarded to generals. Lincoln's speech on April 11th of 1865 angered many, including John Wilkes Booth, as he wanted the freed black slaves to become citizens. At this time, Booth decided that it would no longer be kidnapped, but be murder instead. The conspiracy had several people and several attacks. John Surratt and Samuel Arnold were involved in the kidnap plot, but were not involved in the assassination. In fact, they were not even in our nation's capital at the time of the assassination. And upon learning of the assassination, John Surratt actually fled the country to Quebec. Mary Surratt had a boarding house in Washington in which they used to meet locally to discuss the conspiracy and plan their attacks. Booth assigned Lewis Powell to murder Secretary of State William Seward. Powell did not succeed, but he did injure Seward, his son, and a bodyguard. George Ezra was to murder Vice President Andrew Johnson. He did not even attempt it as his nerves got to him and he sat at a bar and drank instead. David Harold, Samuel Mudd, and Ed Spangler were not a part of the original plot. The only one that actually was a part of the assassination plot was David Harold. Samuel Mudd and Ed Spangler happened to be included just because of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Booth's sadistic second plan becomes reality at 10:25 p.m. when Our American Cousin reaches its best part. Booth used his celebrity status as one of the best-known actors of the time to get up into the presidential booth. Once he got past the first door, he wedged it shut with a piece of a leg of a podium. Once he was in the first door, he waited behind the second door for Our American Cousin to reach a particular point in the play, which he knew by heart, even though he had never performed in it. Once it reached the part that was considered to be the funniest line of the show, he opened the door slightly and at point-blank range shot President Lincoln in the back of the head. The shot from Booth's Derringer entered Lincoln's head right behind his left ear, traveled through his skull, and stopped right above his right eye. Booth then leapt from the balcony down to the stage below, snagging the spur of his boot and the Treasury flag. This caused him to land awkwardly, but as he rose, he raised his knife in the air and yelled "Sic Semper," which was short for "Sic Semper Tyrannis." He then fled from the scene and mounted his horse. The Peterson House. After Booth had left, Lincoln was taken out into the streets and led across the street to the Peterson House, which was another one of the boarding houses at the time. Lincoln was taken in through the house to a back bedroom where he was laid on a bed, and the pillow shown is actually the pillow that Lincoln's head was on, and that actually contains the bloodstains from Lincoln. Army Surgeon Charles Leal was in the audience the night of the play. He scurried across to the house to help take care of Lincoln. After working on Lincoln for several hours, including trying to remove the bullet from Lincoln's skull, he stood and said, "His wound is mortal. It is impossible for him to survive." On April 15th, 1865, at 7:22 a.m., Lincoln perished. Booth's escape. Booth meets Harold, and they retrieve supplies that were pre-placed in Surrattsville. Then they travel to visit Dr. Mudd, as either during the leap or during his attempt to mount the horse on the getaway, it's debated, he injured and actually broke his leg. After they stay a day at Dr. Mudd's house, they continue on and make a couple more stops before finally coming to Richard Garrett's farm on April 24th, 1865. They inform Garrett that Booth is an injured Confederate soldier and wish to take shelter while he heals. Garrett obliges and puts them into his barn around the back of the building. 2 days later, Union troops arrive. They come up to the barn where Harold and Booth had been sleeping and threaten to burn down the building with them inside. Harold surrenders immediately, while Booth does not. While they proceed to set fire to the barn, Boston Corbett, one of the Union troops, and he was actually a sergeant, sneaks around the back and actually gets a chance to take a shot at Booth. He fires at Booth, striking him in the back of the neck, roughly an inch lower than where Lincoln was shot. The shot severs his spinal cord and causes him to lose control of his extremities. Conspirators' fate. Mary Surratt, Lewis Powell, David Harold, and George Ezra are all tried and hung. Samuel Mudd, Samuel Arnold, Edmund Spangler, Michael O'Laughlin are all tried and receive jail. Samuel Mudd and Edmund Spangler are the only two that are pardoned, as it was determined that Samuel Mudd had just helped a patient that came in a time of need, and Ed Spangler simply held the rein for John Wilkes Booth's horse. Mary Surratt was the first woman to also be executed in the United States. Booth's last words were useless, useless, as a Union soldier held Booth's own hands in front of his face so he could see them. Booth died 2 hours later on the steps in front of the barn. His last words, useless, useless, are also a good description of the look back on the conspiracy, as the conspiracy could be described as useless, useless in its goal of helping the South rise again. Lincoln was an intelligent, bold man with a great vision for a better America. His death was only part of a conspiracy by Booth and others to help the South rise. The plan becomes reality at 10:25 on April 14th, 1865. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln was one of the most horrible and impactful events in U.S. history.